Hello and greetings, everyone. This is Ken Miller,
And I'm Wendy Batts.
and this is Random Fit. And Wendy and I are coming at you with some maybe not so trivial information when it comes to different aspects of fitness. Wouldn't you say, Wendy?
That's exactly it. Just some fun facts. Fun
Just
facts.
fun facts, and somewhat relatable way to you. So we hope you enjoyed the last broadcast related to Rocky Four, which was really fun for us. And today, what do we got today, Wendy?
Today we are going to talk about, can you truly squat like a baby?
Okay. But the big question is, do you want to? I guess it's something that we're going to answer throughout this podcast. So Wendy, since we are talking about babies, and since I have never delivered a baby myself, I have two of them, but I'll leave it up to you to talk about babies since you've got one of your own.
Oh, well, yes. We're not going to go that graphic into having a baby. However, let's talk about truly, we always hear like, we want you to have ideal, squats, and we want you to be able to move like a baby. But really, what does that mean? And when you think about it, a baby, or if you're thinking about a toddler has a big head and it's heavy in relation to their body, and it's a great, think about the proportion in their center of mass. And so not only is it their head, but you also have to think about their height. I mean, toddlers are not very tall. Obviously they grow into an adult, and so the depth that they have to go down in order to perform a squat is obviously way different than an adult when we're looking at truly at range of motion. And then one fun fact is that, babies have three bones that are in their pelvis that they don't really become fused together until they hit puberty. And so that obviously plays a big part in the depth and their movement patterns. And because, again, think about the range of motion that a baby can go to. And Ken, I mean, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that before we kind of talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and just going back to, when before I had kids, and when you're holding someone else's baby, and that when you do that handoff, and what's one of the things that they always tell you? It's like, oh,
Hold their head.
hold the head, right? Well, if you think about the head, when it's a little itty bitty thing, that head is about 20% of their body weight, right? And when you look at the actual length of the head relative to the body, it's it starts off at about a quarter of your body length. So however long you are, imagine a quarter of your length being just your head and neck, right? So, and that's one of those things when we were like looking up, the ideal squat and why we want to have this squat and what makes uh, babies or toddlers, babies don't squat, toddlers do. So when you look at all the advantages that toddlers have when they squat, they have that big head and neck. It's a big portion of their body weight, so they have all that leverage towards the front, which allows them to drop their hips. So you got a lot going for you when you're a little one, and getting that butt to the ground, or when you're sitting on your heels pretty much, and their ability just to keep their chest up and their head upright, and you look at their body percentages when it comes to weight and length. There's a lot going for you, but over time those things quickly go away when you look at, okay, how we grow up, and just from an environmental standpoint, but also from your body percentages, where your head now goes from a quarter of your length to now a seventh of your length, and then the weight of your head goes from 20% to 8%. So things change as you start to put on weight. Your proportions change. So weight distribution wise, you start to change up, which makes get all those advantages you had to help you get that deep squat actually go away. But that's just a part of the natural growth process. So the question I think a lot of people are thinking is, so why do we want to squat like a baby? Why is that one of the things that when I go to a personal trainer, he wants me to get my hips down and keep my chest up? So why is that important? Why would he even think about squatting like a little one?
Well, I think, if we look at the image, and I mean, they're all over the internet. So when you see, a baby, or like you said, a toddler, not a baby, but when a toddler squats, I mean, they basically have their butt to the ground. They have, if you look at their torso and you look at their tibia, so the front of their shin, and you look at them from a side view, they're making parallel lines. And I know, like through NASM, and when you're doing assessments, when we're assessing an adult doing a squat, we are trying to get those parallel lines. And the whole purpose of that is, if you have ideal range of motion in your ankles, your knees, and your hips, and you go into that parallel line, doesn't have to mean that we're, as adults, trying to get our butt to the ground. But if we're looking for those parallel lines through movement, then you're going to have equal weight distribution between those specific joints, which is super important, especially as we start loading it with weights, or, we're lifting heavy boxes and squatting and picking things up. I mean, all of it, is ideal. And that's what we're hoping for, when we're training people, is to help them move efficiently and feel better. If we don't have those parallel lines, obviously we're noticing there's going to be a compensation. And so that allows us to identify it. So therefore we can correct it.
Right, right. So, you have your set of clientele, which they have a certain body type, right? And I tend to work with some athletes, but I work a lot with general population. And when I talk about squatting, I do bring up, especially those that have kids. And you remember when your kid was 2 years old and they were squatting, you remember how they did it? And, it's like, yeah, their ankles bend, their knees bend, their hips flex, and, their spine is tall. Well, guess what? That's exactly what we strive to do when we squat. Because if you think about it, we have to squat, right? We have to squat. I mean, at least once a day, right? So if you're going to the at least, and hopefully if you're drinking water throughout the day, as hydration is important. General rule of thumb there, just as a random point here, is, half your body weight in ounces in water, just straight up water. And we're not counting tea or caffeine or coffee or anything like that. But if you're drinking that much water, hopefully you're going to the bathroom multiple times a day, which means you have to squat. And if you're in an Asian country where they don't have the traditional toilets like we have here, where you really have to squat, you have to get those hips down. And it's not like, and I'm sure you've heard stories of your older clients, especially, that if we were talking about squatting, they'll kind of sit and then they'll kind of crash into their seat. And it doesn't have to be relative to sitting in the bathroom, but also when you see how people get into cars, they'll get a certain range and then they'll fall the rest of the way. And if you think, if that's how we're moving, we've lost our ability to decelerate, to lower ourselves with a slow and controlled motion, which can mean, a little heavier impact, but it's also going to mean a decrease in your range as you go forward, and as you go through the aging process. So when we talk about the importance of squat, and we can also think about lunging as a variation of a squat as well. So your ability to bend the ankles, flex the ankles, flex the knees, and flex the hips in a controlled manner. Those are all the things that we have to work back towards, just because of all the things that go into when we grow up, or how we go through the aging process, or what we do behind a computer. We lose that ability to move efficiently, especially in that squatting motion. So, so let's talk about some of the things that outside of just growing, we go from a quarter to a seventh, and from and those percentages wise, that changes your mechanics. But when we go through the aging process, as you're growing up and you're going through the school systems, one of the first things that happens that takes away your ability to move well is the fact that a lot of schools, when it comes down to budgetary issues, unfortunately, one of the first things get cut are the arts, so music, art classes, things like that, but also physical education. So when you take away movement from a child's physical or daily activity, you're going to replace it with what? Things where you sit down, classes where you sit down. So which takes away the demand on the foot and ankles, the knees and the hips, and you're sitting on, you're just sitting on your bottom all day long.
Mhm.
But you throw that on top of not moving, taking 45 minutes to an hour away from someone's a child's or an adolescent's ability to move, you're just going to compound dysfunction year after year after year.
Absolutely. And to your point, environmental factors play such a big role because,
Mm-hmm.
as a toddler, you're just playing, you're looking for your truck or your Legos or whatever it is, and you're bending down, you're moving, again, I don't want to say there's not a care in the world, but again, they're learning, they're adapting to their environment. Everything is new. So it's so fun to watch toddlers just get that aha moment when they see something that's exciting, to them because they've never seen it before. However, to your point, as a toddler ages, and they do go through the school systems, and as you said, they're sitting all day. And think about their book bags. I see, my kid is still a little guy, but you see kids getting off the school bus with these gigantic backpacks, and they're hunched over because it's super heavy, and they're having to carry this throughout the day. But even that's kind of when it starts. Like you said, you've got school throughout the day. They're decreasing the physical activity. So if they're in a seated position for many hours and then they're not doing anything to correct that, then there's also now going to start to be imbalances at the hip complex. And
Mm-hmm.
and again, if we don't really start to look at kind of our youth and start to focus on helping them out of these compensations that could continue to get worse as they age, then that's problem number one. But again, training is still so new for youth, but a lot of coaches are now starting to identify the importance of proper flexibility, proper activation, proper preparation for whatever sport they're doing. However, sports is just that. It's sports. It's fun and everything, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing for your body, So,
Right.
so another consideration. But and then again, as they age, they get out of school, they get a quote, a real job. And if they're sitting long hours at a desk, if they have meetings, then they have to wear business attire. Think about, women in high heels or men in dress shoes. All of that is there's a heel on the back of their shoe. So therefore, they're going to limit the range of motion in their ankle, which can then start going up the entire kinetic chain or up the entire body. That can cause one compensation after another. So it is a rippling effect. And, babies and toddlers, they're not there yet. Half the time they don't even wear shoes. So,
Right. Right.
Yeah. A lot
Which
of
makes
things
it
to think about.
a big waste of money when you buy shoes for kids. It's like, this kid's not even walking around yet, and, or they make great hand-me-downs because you just put them on their feet, but there's zero wear down. So it's like, hey, I got these perfect shoes for you.
It's all about the picture. They have to look cute, and because we do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, these shoes are fantastic, and they may not be
Right.
functional, but they look good. So
Right. Now speaking about shoes, I mean, you brought up high heel shoes or elevated heel shoes for females. Well, the other thing about shoes, and we're not trying to bash shoes, we need shoes, right? But in its role in how it creates dysfunction up the chain from the foot and ankle all the way up to the hip, is that a lot of people forget that even men and business professional, it's a hard sole shoe. So it's still elevated, it's not like what a female would wear, but it's still elevated. But because it's a hard sole shoe, you don't get that pronation and supination, or that ability for that foot to collapse and rise as you walk naturally. So you start to develop those compensation patterns all the way up the chain as well. So if the ankle doesn't move well, I think one of the points that we're making here, Wendy, with bringing up shoes relative to hips, is the fact that if the foot and ankle doesn't move well, neither will the hips. And both of those joints, with the knee in the middle, knee stuck in the middle, right? It has no choice. It's just going to go this way and that way. But it's the hip and the foot and ankle that have to do all that dynamic movement in all three planes of motion, forward, side to side, as well as a rotational component. But if those two bookends don't work well, the knee is going to suffer. And again, back to the point of this, it's going to take away from your ability to squat down, because if your foot doesn't move, neither will your hips. So.
Mm-hmm. And when you're sitting for long, like long periods of time, and we're picking on sitting, but it could be anything, whatever's not normal to your body. If you're standing in with your feet turned out, or, as a mom and holding a baby, you sometimes will hike a hip to hold on to the baby to, obviously do multiple things. That stuff over time starts to become what your body considers the new normal. And so I know with my clients, often I'll tell them, hey, I want you to really focus on trying to stand with your feet straight ahead. And they're like, well, my feet are straight. But then when they visually look down, they're turned out to the side, because what it feels like and what it looks like are two totally different things. It's kind of like your brain is like a programming system. And if you program your body to move and work this way, but you don't reprogram it the right way, that incorrect way becomes the new quote norm. And trying to break that programming takes a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of effort. But again, it's awesome to see foam rolling and stretching kind of coming back into, like, this is super important. Recovery is super important now. But it's really identifying, hey, what's causing these compensations? How did I change from, I was a baby, I was being swaddled, now I learned to walk, and now I'm a mess. I mean, that's what it's coming down to. And what? It's just, think also how you sleep. I mean, for the longest time, I was a stomach sleeper. So think about the positioning of my head. In order to breathe, you got to turn your neck. So your neck is in a weird position. Like if you bring your knees up to your stomach, your hips are in a shortened position for as long as you're asleep, like, anywhere from 7 to 8 hours, hopefully. But again, you've got to work with what you have. And so,
So you were a stomach sleeper. I used to be more like a Spider-Man sleeper, when you're sleeping, you're kind of, and your knee is up to the side.
Oh yeah.
I if I slept like that today, I'd have to call my neighbor and say, hey, you're gonna have to call somebody up here and get me out of bed. I would not be able to move. So sleep patterns, how you sleep, and I don't know how many times, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times too. It's like somebody comes in and they're doing one of these jobbers.
Oh yeah.
I think I slept wrong last night. It's like,
my favorite is when
now you're in a bad
And I was just going to say, my favorite is when they say that.
When you have to recover from your sleep session.
Exactly. Well, that's where I was heading. Or you say, okay, well, what do you mean you think you slept weird? And I'm like, well, how do you sleep like normally? And they're like, oh, I sleep on my side, but I have my arm up underneath my pillow. And I'm like, okay, first of all, that's not normal. That's not normal, and that is going to lead to more pain and restriction in your neck. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we can do to correct just your sleeping pattern first, and then we can minimize I think my neck is a little tight or quote stuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Corrective exercise for sleep, Wendy. I think we need to come up with a curriculum for that. You think we can?
Hey, you know what?
Got a foam roll, stretch, and then go to sleep.
I think we're on to something. Maybe that's our next thing. Yeah.
the next.
How do you sleep?
How do you sleep? We got to compensate. You got to observe compensation patterns for sleep. Anyway, I think we're digressing. So
shocker, right?
when it comes to, again, we're getting back to the point of, when it comes to movement and how we're just gradually taking away movement. And the sad part of it is that we get acclimated to it so early. Again, from like my kids they're doing their distance learning right now. They're sitting behind the computer. So one's in 4th grade, one's in 2nd grade. And you think again, if it wasn't here, they'd be in class sitting. But now they're just staring at a screen, forward shoulder, head is, hopefully they're engaged. But they're flexed in the hip and the knee and the ankle, but they're doing that for, from 8:30 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But then you take that is their way of life from 1st grade through college, and then when they get into the workforce, now they're going to do that on their commute to work, during work, on their commute home from work, and hopefully they're active and doing something recreational, like some kind of softball league or something after work. I don't know, something to where you get outside. But it's such a gradual creep that you don't, the hip tightness, the knee and foot and ankle immobility, it's just crept along for the previous 14, 16 years, that all of a sudden you're asked to do something like a overhead squat, and then you realize I can't squat. And the realization now has to come from, has to hit home with you when you're thinking, okay, well, I've put on this weight. Now I have to move, whether it's go outside and run, get on the elliptical, get on the treadmill, lift some weights, do some squats, do some lunges. And now that you have to move in space, and now that you have to, if you're going to spend some calories, you have to have some speed and tempo with it, or you're going to have some load, whether it's holding a sandbag or a dumbbell or a bar. And now you really realize how much you need those hips. And especially if you have a personal trainer, or if you have a workout partner and they're telling you lower, get lower, get lower, whatever you just did, get lower than that. All right, get lower. And you realize, hey, I can't do it. Right. So, and that brings up, one of the reasons why you have to have, if you're going to do it right, you're going to have somebody look at you, whether it's a personal trainer who's experienced with observing, or experienced with assessments and observing those less than ideal compensation patterns. And that's where you can figure out, okay, what's going to work well for Wendy, what's going to work well for Tony, to get them to move better, to get them to squat and to try and regain what we had when we were toddlers and lost over the years.
Well, I mean, I think to your point though, too, for those of you that have never had an assessment done on yourself, it's very eye-opening, because for me, I thought, you know what, I do this for a living, like my squat must be fantastic. And I never really had someone sit down and say, listen, let's do an assessment on you. And then I was kind of shell-shocked when I saw my own results. And I'm like, you know what? Wow, like there are a lot of things I need to work on. And, I know, listening to my clients and those of you out there, again, that may never have had a trainer but have had this happen. We see the statistics that approximately like 80% of the population at some point in their life will have low back pain. And I mean, that's a significant number. But if you are kind of that person that sits a lot because of work, or you've got a lot of stress in your job, and you're trying to multitask doing a bunch of different things, and then you decide to go to the gym and you haven't really identified like the right kind of things to stretch, or right things to try to realign your body correctly, and then you lift heavy, or you're continuously running or doing something with these compensations that are not ideal, then you get sore, you're miserable, your lower back hurts, your knee hurts, there's issues going on, and then you just don't go back to the gym. And so again, that's kind of like when we talk about, people will come in, they join the gym at the beginning of the year, everyone's gung ho, like they've got these goals, but then they never return. It's probably because they did something wrong, and they just don't feel as ideal as they thought they would going into doing something that was going to make them move and feel better. Because Ken, as you stated before, I mean, if you don't have the range of motion and you're trying to force it, it's never going to work. You've got to work on getting that range of motion. And I think that's kind of one of the big takeaways too, is, babies are super flexible. Toddlers are amazing. Like when they sit down and they sit in these positions I only dream of sitting in, they do it without even thinking about it. Because again, I mean, obviously there is the three bones that aren't fused. I mean, that's super important when you're thinking about the hips, and also thinking about the acetabulum, because in an adult, ours is way deeper than in a toddler. And so they do have a little more degrees of freedom in their hips than we do as we age. But, I mean, can you truly squat like a toddler? The answer to that is no. However, you can still squat with ideal form if you work on it correctly. And I think, to me, that's my big takeaway. That was the key point that I really wanted to stress on this, because you got to do the work in order to move the way that everybody wants to, you know?
Right. And one of the things you said earlier is like you realize, or somebody watches you squat, and then you realize, okay, this is what I have to foam roll. This is what I have to stretch. This is what I need to strengthen. And this is how I'm going to string everything together. And for a lot of people, that is a lot, and it's overwhelming. And you're thinking, I am never going to overcome this mountain of things that people are telling me to. Or if I'm watching, social media, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to work on my ankle. I have to work on my hips. And, and let's not forget about this low back pain that I get occasionally. So, and the advantage of really getting assessed is that if you're with somebody who's worth their weight in gold when it comes to their skill set in personal training, one of the things that they will be able to do is be able to break things down into bite-sized chunks. So here you are, you've got all of this, and I got a list of things I need to foam roll, list of things I need to stretch, list of things I need to strengthen. And, where do you begin? Well, if you're with somebody who actually understands the process, they've assessed you pretty well, they've kind of ruled out some things, and from there, they've been able to prioritize, okay, out of all the things that we can do, these are your big rocks. And hopefully if we break these big rocks down, those little rocks, some of them might even disappear, right? So if I work on your hip internal rotation, right? If I work on your hip internal rotation and knee extension for a lot of issues, it's going to clean up other things in your movement pattern. So that's where getting with a trainer and move and observing your movement efficiencies, and then being able to prioritize. Maybe it's the hips and not the ankles, but with another variation of assessments, you realize that, hey, it is the ankles and not so much the hips, right? As far as what we can hammer down first. So all those points are great points. And the one thing that to break it down is like, yeah, we need to move efficiently, but be patient, get the right guidance, hopefully. And it's hard to discern what the right guidance is if you've never been with a personal trainer, or if you've never been told that you don't move well. It's like, hey, I can still bench 275 pounds. Who are you to tell me I don't move well? Well, you can't squat and without your knees caving in, and you can do 225, but your shoulder starts to hurt you after a while, or your low back starts to hurt you. So what good does it do to be, strong and pretty and have all those muscles showing if you don't move well, because or you're hurt all the time?
Well, and that kind of brings up a really important point is, okay, you may be able to bench that, but where in real life do you need to bench that? Is that something that you need to do every single day for your job?
Right.
Because then that's important. But if you can't do the activities of daily living, like, picking up your kid if they're younger, or, picking up, going to pick up a piece of paper that you happen to drop on the floor because something's going to pull, give, or hurt, that's kind of a problem. And, one of my favorite quotes, and this is from one of our dear friend, Ken and I both, Rick Ritchie. His big thing is, a whole lot of, what is it? A little bit of something is better than a whole lot of nothing. And I mean, exactly, that's the way you need to approach your program. So sorry, Rick, that I kind of butchered that in the very beginning, but it's so true. And that is, that's something that I love every time he says, because I mean, that's true in life. I mean, you have to work towards a goal, and, fitness and movement and everything is a goal. I mean, and you have to do something every day, or, make it a priority, because again, you can't just assume that, if you just do something a little, like once or twice a week, and you have a magnitude of pain or issues or compensations or whatever it is, discomfort, it's never going to get better unless you put some time and effort into it. And so it doesn't have to be multiple times. And Ken, you can talk about this too. People feel like, oh, I've got to spend an hour every day, working on this. And to me, it's 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, I don't know what you tell people, but just do a little bit. It doesn't have to be a lot.
Yeah.
Just do a little as often as you can. And you're going to see gains every time, as long as you're consistent. You've got to be consistent, just like you have got to be consistent with things that you do in your job, or things that you do, you know, in your family life. It all takes work, and if you apply it, then again, you're going to move better, feel better, and then you'll perform better in everything that you do.
Right. And that's something that I emphasize, especially with my corporate athletes, right? Those clients that I have that, yeah, they sit behind a desk. That is their job. That is their activity. So whatever you're going to put your body through, you have to train for it. So if I'm going to sit down, if that's what I have to put my body through, you might as well train for it. And when I say train for it, that 10 to 15 minutes or 10, 12 minutes that you might be able to carve out, if you can do that instead of an hour block, which a lot of people think that's what they've got to do. I didn't have time for a workout. Did you have 10 minutes where you just kind of twiddled your thumbs or kind of looked at the sky or scrolled through your social media? If that same 10 minutes, you take that to, you know, to foam roll your calves, foam roll your hamstrings, get a calf stretch, get a little hamstring stretch, or even more appropriately, probably a calf quad foam roll and a calf quad stretch. Mm-hmm. Hey, there's 10 minutes, and you're not going to get, you know, and that just unwound what you've just bound by sitting down for the last 2 hours. So then you can hit the next 2 hours without getting as crushed. And then maybe the next block of 10 minutes, maybe you get, let's say, your hypervolt, and you just get the front of your shoulders and your biceps, and then you go and get a little pec stretch, right? And, you know, a little bit of a neck stretch, and then go until your next break. And then maybe for the third session, you get something, you get the mini sphere, and you get your TFL, and maybe you sit on it and get your glutes, and you do a little hip flexor stretch, and you get a little hip stretch, a little figure 4 stretch, and you just opened up the hip. So that's one strategy I might incorporate, something for the foot and ankles, something for the hips, something for the shoulders, where if you have 10-minute increments broken up over 3 times during your work day, well, guess what? You just got 30 minutes worth of working out done, right? You didn't sweat or anything, but it prevented you or kind of offset this posture, right? Forward, elevated shoulders, hip flexed, all of that stuff, because we get compressed, through our trunk and our spine. And it's our job, if we're truly going to be healthy, and that what that means is we have a nice elongated spine. We have an open anterior surface of our trunk, and that's what's going to help us move better, not just here, but in other places. It just takes one area of the body to be compressed and not moving well to affect other parts of the body to not move well also. So, when it comes to the squat, it doesn't always have to be about the hips and getting your butt down. I mean, that is one region of the body that we're watching when we're observing somebody move. But you have to think about what else is connected to the hips that's going to affect how well the hips move. And I think that's a good segue to talk about a little bit about compensations and some of the things that we can observe that can help you figure out what needs to be addressed after observing a certain movement pattern.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the points that we talk about our squat just, all together is, if you see that your feet are turning out because, again, maybe it's your high heel shoes, or maybe it's just your calves are extremely tight, which is, if you're walking a lot or hiking or doing those things, it's a very, very common compensation. And it's something as easy as foam rolling the outside of your calves and then stretching them. And then if even if you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't have a personal trainer there to tell you what you see, if you go into a squat, just look at how you move. Like, do your knees go in? And if so, spend some time stretching your inner thigh. Do your arms. If you lift your hands over your head and try to squat, do they fall forward? And if they do, stretch your lats, or if you know that you have rounded shoulders, stretch your pecs. If you have a lot of stress in your neck, stretch your neck. And hold those stretches, 20 to 30 seconds, multiple times a day, or as often as you can. I mean, those are certain things that you can do on your own. The big thing to also remember, though, is things get really tight and they're going to put you out of alignment. But there's also the opposite side to also consider, which is the muscles that are in a lengthened state. Meaning, if your pecs are super, super rounded and your neck is forward, the muscles in the back are in a lengthened position and allowing those compensations to happen. And so, there are certain exercises like, trying to bring you back, doing cobras, doing, retractions, so chin tucks, little things like that can make a significant difference in your movement. But also think too about I want to make sure that I pinpoint this, is like your squat depth. Like, think about just sitting in a chair. Like, you don't have to go lower than that. And if you do look at a toddler and you're like, I wonder what a toddler squat really looks like, I haven't really looked at that. You're going to see that their butt really is towards the ground. But as adults, and think about our limb length difference. I mean, obviously we have a greater distance that we have to go in order to get that low to the ground. We would have to tuck our hips underneath. So we would have to go into a compensation in order to get our butt that low, which isn't what we ideally want to do. I mean, so again, our squat depth would be different. But, again, just even if there's small compensations, there's super easy ways to get yourself out of it. You brought up some great Hyperice products. I love them. The vibration therapy and the technology that they have, I think, is fantastic. But even just, a regular foam roller to start, if you're not used to that, or you don't want to spend that kind of money just to start, it's better than nothing. And again, just take I hate to say this, take baby steps to get there, but you can, definitely work towards getting that ideal range of motion. It just takes time. And again, those baby steps.
Yeah. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it didn't take one day for you to move the way we move, right? And whatever inefficiency that reflects. But we just have to be patient. You have to be consistent, and you have to be patient. And hopefully, if you have the right strategy, you're going to accelerate the time it takes for you to actually move better. But that's going to show itself in a lot of different ways. You're going to feel better. Things are going to feel easier. You're going to be more productive in the weight room or the gym or health club or walking or whatever it is that you're doing physically. But for the most part, you're going to notice that you're going to go through the aging process with a lot more ease compared to if you didn't do anything, to get the hips down with ability to move the ankles, move the knees, and move the hips, right?
Well, and again, think about how you look, because I'm not sure, like, if you think about this, if you see someone that's walking towards you and their feet are out, so they're kind of walking like a duck, and then they are kind of rounded at their back, and their shoulders are forward and their neck's forward, and they're coming towards you. A, they look miserable, but B, it's just not a good look. So, I mean,
right.
People are so concerned about wrinkles and gray hair and that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, well, those are, cosmetic things. I mean, yes, you can deal with that in a totally different way. But posturally, the way that you look, I think also makes a big difference, because you feel better, you're going to move better, you're going to perform better. But just on an appearance side, you're going to, feel taller. You're going to breathe easier. You're going to be able to do things with simplicity, because it's not like an effort to do some of this stuff, because again, you're working on proper movement mechanics.
Right. So overall, I think getting back to the squat motion, again, and I say squat just as a general term, right? It's a general term for just being able to move the ankles, move the hips. The knees are going to do what they're going to do. That's why I like to pick on the foot and ankle and the hips. Either one doesn't move well, nothing else is going to move well either. So whatever it takes to get you to move more like a baby, then I guess the other end of the spectrum, right? When you're flexed, you're hunched over, your butt is tucked under, and you're you look like a human cashew, or you look like, you look like
A
you're looking
crescent
for,
moon.
yeah, you're looking for change all the time,
Right,
right?
right.
So your body's gonna take shape into whatever it can stabilize. And if your body can't trust your glutes and your hips, it's just going to take that out of the equation and just kind of curve everything else around it, like that little, like what you're saying, that crescent moon, or as I like to say, human cashew.
I like
Mostly
that.
because cashew is my favorite nut. But anyway, uh, all right, Wendy.
Yeah.
Any last comments or statements or takeaways when it comes to squatting like a baby?
Yeah, I think, again, if you haven't looked like online or you haven't seen a toddler squat, it's really fascinating to watch. And again, my kid is now 4, but watching him grow and just seeing the changes, we've started to notice like his left foot's turning out. We're like, oh no. So we're like already working on trying to fix that.
Hmm.
I don't know if
Right.
that's good or bad. However, we are.
Yeah.
But
Good babies.
I know, right? But I mean, I think it's fascinating just to watch the changes and then, identifying, what could be causing some things that aren't ideal. Like, like you said, foot out, knees in, arch back, arms falling forward head. The tech neck is a big thing that's out there these days because there's so many people looking down, texting on their
Hmm.
phone. I mean, unfortunately, that's a huge issue that's starting to really take off now, especially over
Yeah.
COVID. Um, and uh, and so, I think the big takeaways is, again, you're never going to be able to probably squat like a baby. Again, there were a lot of factors we just talked about, where we have obviously a height difference. There is a head, proportion. we're proportioned differently than we were when we were, 2 or so. And even though we can't squat with ease like that, at this time in our lives, as we continue to age, working towards ideal range of motion, getting those parallel lines in your squat, it really, really can make such a big difference in how you
Yeah.
feel, how you move, and decrease the chances of injury long term. So take care of yourself. I mean, that's I think my
Hmm.
big takeaway. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Take care of yourself. Find out where you may not be moving appropriately, and then take the right steps on trying to get yourself more flexible in certain areas and stronger in other areas. So therefore you can start to have a really good squat. Maybe not like a toddler, however,
Yeah.
a good squat for you.
Right. And I think, to go with that, the one thing that I want to impress upon people is that, you want to move well and you want to move often. So just like, you ever try to follow a kid, a little toddler? You ever?
Yes.
Yeah. It's you're like, man, when does this kid sit down? Right.
uh, yep.
So move well. So what you're talking about is, move well, move better. And then my tag on to that is you got to move often, just like a kid would,
Mhm.
just like a toddler would. So because it's one of those things where you spend more energy, you get more energy, and it's a cycle that just feeds on itself. So if you move better, you're going to want to move. If you move better, you're going to want to move more.
Right.
And if you have more capacity, you ever see anybody that has like gets surgery and they feel so much better? What do they want to do? They just want to go outside. They want to do things, and it's up to the doctor or the physical therapist saying, "Hey, you're doing too much. You need to calm
Yeah.
down." Right. So, but in this case, if it's not surgery related, you're moving better. You should be moving more because that's what it's going to take for you to now, propagate that the level of high energy and keep you vital and vibrant throughout. Did I just use 2 V words?
You did.
It
That's
makes you,
impressive.
yeah, it makes you vital to living your life. And
Mhm.
that's what it's going to take to kind of delay that aging process. So yeah, I think that's a good amount of information when it comes to squatting like a baby, or squatting
Yeah.
squatting like
This
a
is so
toddler.
much fun. I mean, I could talk about this stuff all day with you, Ken. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, thanks for doing this topic with me.
Yeah,
It's
no,
been good
my
times.
pleasure. Yeah, it's always a good time, Wendy. So I'll catch up with you next time. So thank you everybody for listening. And if you like what you're listening to, please subscribe to whatever format you're listening to this podcast on, and we'd really appreciate having you around the next time. So take care and be well, everybody.